Go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce our special guest speakers here for the day. I'm very excited for the topic. So with us today, we have two folks here from Transitions Counseling and Consulting. We have Megan Fox, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Transitions Counseling and Consulting and is a licensed professional counselor, a certified school guidance counselor, and a licensed substance abuse counselor, and holds certification in EMDR. Megan has extensive training in treatment of trauma, codependency, and addictions, and has trained with experts in the field, such as Pia Melody, RN, and Dr. Claudia Black, PhD. She has over 16 years of experience working with adolescents and young adults, and also specializes in working with first responders and their families. With us again here today is Jessica Brubaker, LPC. Jessica Brubaker is a licensed professional counselor and holds a bachelor's degree in family and consumer sciences education and master's degree in professional counseling from Grand Canyon University. She has 11 years of experience in education, both as a classroom teacher in child and human development and career exploration, and a school counselor in a large public school. Jessica has also worked with an adolescent therapist in an intensive outpatient therapy program and as a clinical director of Transitions Counseling and Consulting. Jessica is a writer and presenter focusing on topics such as mental health, personal development, and self-care. And Jessica is extremely passionate about her work with adolescents and their families. So without further ado, I know we're all muted, so we won't hear it. So I'll clap really hard for everybody. But I'd like to go ahead and turn the screen over to our first presenter today, Jessica Brubaker. Warm round of applause in your homes, everybody.
Is it bad form to clap for myself? I just like to hear it.
No, we'll be okay. So at this point, feel free to go ahead and share your screen and
Cool. Okay.
We'll get started. Sorry, one final reminder, folks. We encourage questions throughout the presentation. Just please direct them to the chat box, and we will take some breaks periodically and make sure that we're answering all those for you.
Okay.
All righty.
All right, there we go. And let me get us live here. There we go. Okay. Hello. Like was just introduced, I am Jessica Brubaker, and this is the incomparable Megan Fox. She's better than the other one. So we are here to talk about increased acuity in the adolescent population. I was looking at, as you guys were checking in from a lot of the places that you're at, and I saw a lot of clinics, I saw some schools, I saw Arizona, I saw outside of Arizona, and I think that the one thing that we have potentially in common at this moment is that we are all here because we're noticing that things are getting a little bit more acute at this particular juncture. We all know the kind of, last year and a half-ish that we've all had. And I think that we are either starting to or have been noticing for a while how things are starting to creep in the world of mental health. So that is what we are going to talk about today. Next slide. We were already introduced, but these are our lovely headshots where my hair actually is blown out and looks super nice. But again, Megan Fox, Jessica Brubaker. Our intention today, our presentation objectives are to increase the awareness of the scope of mental health issues in our current climate and how it's impacting adolescents. We really want to be able to identify areas of intervention with higher acuity adolescents. So much of what's happening right now, what we're doing in the higher acuity areas is really just about like surviving the crisis. So it's not necessarily about how we're digging into past trauma in an individual session. This is really about what can you do in the moment that helps a kid who is experiencing a crisis of urges for self-harm, suicidal thoughts, things of that nature, a panic attack, things like that. So it's really like brief interventions for these higher acuity adolescents. We also would like to talk a little bit about levels of care, because that's something, depending on where you're at, I know that's a conversation that we have a lot, whether it's an IOP situation or a PHP situation or residential or inpatient or whatever, it's understanding when it's appropriate for somebody to be in a particular level of care. And then finally, we want to talk a little bit about how you can support yourself, because all of this is true. Things are getting more acute. People are struggling. I know that we're busier. How long have we been muted?
It just was for a moment there. Sorry,
Okay.
I think there was a technical glitch while we were letting somebody else enter.
There's
No,
another mute
It was another mute
situation.
no, you're good. It was about 6 seconds. You're fine.
Okay. Woo. Okay,
I'm back. Okay. So the last part, what I was just saying is we're really wanting to talk a little bit too about how you can support yourself, because all of these things are true. Things are more acute. People are struggling. We're busy. You're busy. The hospitals are busy. That's absolutely true because of all of those things. And you folks on this call are the ones that are holding all of it. And so I think that we tell our clients or patients, whatever you refer to them as, to do self-care themselves, probably like 85,000 times a day. And we say, oh, I should practice what I preach and things of that nature. But we really, really want to support you in making sure that you are taking care of yourself, because we're all here to help other humans, right? And also we can't do that if we're not helping ourselves. So we're definitely going to, essentially we're talking about what's going on, how can you help people, what does that all mean? And then wrap it up with how can I take care of myself in all of this because of the state of our current climate. So normally at this time I would say, is that cool with everybody? I'm going to assume that you're giving me a thumbs up and we're going to go to the next slide.
Maybe we're gonna go to the next slide. All of a sudden it's not. Oh, there we go. Okay, we got this.
Yeah, we do. So this wouldn't be a CEU if we didn't share some data with you, because we always have to have the, the statistics to back up our things. So I think it's important to notice, even before the pandemic happened, there were more teenagers and young adults dying from suicide than cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, influenza, and chronic lung disease combined. We're all in the same field. We know that suicide is a thing that is happening. Every day in our nation, there was an average of 3,470 suicide attempts by teens in grades 9 through 12. And in Arizona specifically, from the time of 2009 to 2015, the rate of suicide for people who are 18 and under went up 81%. We're all in the field. We know what's happening. And then we had a pandemic. And we don't actually know the scope of what that's going to look like because the data is still being collected. But here's what we've noticed at Transitions. And I guess maybe I'll pause really quickly. We're going to talk about our programs at the end, but I think maybe it would be important for you to know exactly what we do. Transitions Counseling has 5 offices across the Valley, and we treat adolescents and adults. Probably like 80 to 85% of our clientele is the adolescent population.
Adolescent and young adult.
Adolescent and young adult. And we obviously have individual services. I don't know if that's obvious. I don't know if that made sense, but we have individual services, but most of what we do is group, intensive outpatient, and IOP, which if you're not familiar with those, we're definitely going to talk about that in the levels of care portion of this presentation. But we are treating clients who maybe just got released from the hospital or are having a lot of suicidal thoughts, a lot of self-harm behaviors, those kinds of things. So what we're noticing with that population is that suicidality seems to be higher than ever before. Like I said, we don't have full data to back that up because we're still in it, but that anecdotally, we're noticing a lot more suicidality. We are noticing way more frequent and more severe self-harm. We are noticing higher anxiety. A lot more people coming to us with, I live at a 9 all the time, or I have 3 or 4 panic attacks a day. We at Transitions have more adolescents in our services than we ever have before. And we're definitely growing. We've been growing for a couple of years, so I'm sure that that has something to do with it, but we've really noticed that our census has gone up quite a bit in the last year. We are noticing much more drug and alcohol use, which has been exacerbated by the legalization of recreational marijuana in Arizona. Those of you that are outside of Arizona, I don't know if that is something that you guys are experiencing as well, but it's definitely something that we are noticing here in Arizona. We are also noticing a lot more impulsivity and difficulty finding placement when we're trying to refer them. I always say refer up to a higher level of care. We're noticing that we have people who maybe are actively suicidal that perhaps need inpatient, and there's not beds. So there's definitely some things that are happening that indicate that our clients are struggling a lot more, and also lots of people are struggling a lot more, because it's kind of an overarching theme that what we're noticing is not different than what other clinics are noticing. Is that your experience?
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. And I would, in talking with people across the country, doing similar things to what we do, it's not just Arizona. This really is, across the United States and probably the world. With that, one of the things I just wanted to share, it's kind of interesting reflecting, like Jessica said, being in the midst of all of this still. And I think that there's like this really, especially in Arizona, because things have opened up quite a bit. I know that our inoculation rate is somewhere around 50%. There's the school. I just got an email the other day that Deer Valley, which is one of our largest districts in Arizona, now masks are going to be optional moving forward. So there's all of these signs, that things are going back to, and holding up the fingers, quote, normal. But I think one of the things we need to realize is that even though things are opening up, even though, and I've got kids at home, even though my kids are starting to like venture out to other kids' houses again, finally, and like, go to a water park maybe, or, making plans slowly for the summer, that things really aren't back to normal. There really is a lasting impact, on the kids and us as well, of the long-term isolation that has happened over the past 18 months. And we are seeing a lot. I see this, like I said, in my own kids and the kids that I work with here at Transitions, and just generally speaking, such higher levels of social anxiety, which is concerning because that was already a thing. That was already a thing before all of this happened. And because of that long-term isolation, and I think adults, you guys can probably relate to this. I know that other adults that I've spoken with can relate to this. Like, we've forgotten how to have conversations with people. We've forgotten about, like, smiling is different because we've been wearing a mask for 18 months. There's just all of these, socially, I don't know what the word would be, but social contextual, things that we haven't been practicing. And so our adolescents, who are supposed to be practicing that sort of at the beginning of their lives, to get to know who they are, to go through their individuation stages, all of that, they've basically been on pause for 18 months. And so that's really hard, and so the getting back to normal, I think this is going to take some time. And there's definitely, one of the things I mentioned on the slide is this trickle down effect too. And so, I know that you guys are probably all privy to some statistical analysis that's been released about different things with adults, like much higher levels of domestic violence, of course, higher levels in that population, adult population as well, with suicide and suicide attempts, general mental health issues, just trusted adults, parents, teachers, coaches, not being okay. The people that the adolescents depended on to get them through were also not okay. Increased levels of drug and alcohol abuse as well. So we've got all of that that's sort of infiltrating adolescent general mental health as well. And not that any of this was new, right? This has always been there, but we have to, I think, understand that there is a higher level of acuity because the environment has been different, so we're going to see an increase of all of these things, probably, and I'm not a statistician, is that the word?
That is the word.
Is that the word? Is that what I'm looking for?
Statistician?
Yeah, there we go. But I would really think that over the next year, we're going to be dealing with this stuff. The other piece that, again, this was here already, we did a presentation at Deer Valley Unified right before the pandemic hit about addiction to video games and cellular devices and such. But that is also something that's really increased among our youth because they were stuck in their rooms, and so that's something else that we've seen a lot.
They spent 18 months on TikTok.
18 months on TikTok. Yes, exactly. And then I think one other thing that's really important for us to point out is the loss. Jessica and I both do come from the education environment. So I think that this is something that we kind of gravitate towards in terms of sharing about data, but the last 18 months in the education system. So students really struggling with GPA, also not having those same opportunities in preparation for the next step. There's a lot of anxiety that's been produced, in the adolescent population around what am I going to do next? They didn't have classroom instruction, all of those kind of things. And it's not just about that education piece from a GPA or learning perspective in the classroom. It's also the lost development, not being able to put things together. We've definitely seen an increase of numbers in terms of like 13 to 15-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of that is because these are the kids that started high school in the pandemic. And so that natural progression and the support that they maybe would have hopefully received from guidance counselors and so on and so forth really wasn't there. And so there's sort of this lost year. And I think we're seeing that for kids that are that went into college and also.
Well, and I think we talk about like things going back to normal. And this is a phrase that sometimes like gets on my nerves, but I'm going to use it anyways. I think that we have to be willing to accept that what we thought was normal, even as we get back to normal, it's just going to look different. People say it all the time. Oh, it's a new normal. And I think that that's true. And I don't know what that actually means quite yet, but I think that we have to recognize that things are going to look different.
Yeah. And I think that there definitely, there is hope. And I think there are some solutions to, what we're going through as people right now. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about, but specifically with the adolescent population, how we can help normalize the situation in a way, that helps them to get to the next place as well.
So our charge as clinicians, what do we do, whether you are seeing people individually, seeing them in a school environment, seeing them in an office, seeing them in a group, seeing them in a hospital? Overall, our job is to hold space for these humans that are having intense emotions. And that's true for adults and adolescents. And what we're talking about right now is adolescents. And generally, adolescents have less of an ability to regulate their own emotions without assistance. So our job is to hold space for them as they have those intense emotions, normalize the experience, and educate about why those things are normal. Teach them to tolerate their distress so that they can survive the crisis. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in just a moment. And then teach them to regulate their emotions so that they can mitigate the experience while they are in the middle of the crisis. There's lots of things that happen in therapy, in group, in the school counselor's office, etc. But generally, what I think is that this is essentially what we're doing most of the time. Distress tolerance, this particular phrase, distress tolerance, is most closely associated with DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. So if you're familiar with that, but really distress tolerance is just about how we survive the crisis. I like to talk to my clients about emotions being like a wave, where you start at the bottom of the wave and then something triggers it, right? Maybe you don't always have awareness of that trigger, but there is a trigger or an activating event, and you sort of make your way up the wave. And I know that you can't see me, but I'm using my hands because that's what I do. You make your way up the wave, and when you get to the top point, that's the crisis point. That's the most intense part of it. That's when you have a suicidal thought or an urge to self-harm or a panic attack or a rage moment. When you're in that crisis, what's generally, quote unquote, supposed to happen with emotions is that we're at the bottom of the wave. We ride the wave, have the most intense part without a crisis, and come back down. But when you don't have tools to tolerate the distress that's happening, we end up with a crisis point at the most intense part and don't come back down. We often get reactivated because we haven't taken care of the thing that has sent us on the wave in the first place. So distress tolerance is really about tools for coping with that wave of emotion. And it's, in most ways, it's about tools that can be used in the moment. I said at the beginning, we're talking about increased acuity in adolescence. And although if you're a human on this call that sees people individually, although individual sessions are often about digging into the trauma and the process and the relationships and all of those things, we really need to, with this higher acuity, be teaching them, okay, how do you tolerate this so that when we do dig in, you don't have to have a crisis. So this is the, oh no, just kidding. Sorry. When I first learned this, I'm going to teach you a tool, and in a second we're going to turn off the PowerPoint. I'm actually going to go to an old school whiteboard because I can't ever get the whiteboard on Zoom to work. But when we talk about tolerating distress, we're really talking about, this is how I phrase it, we really talk about how we experience emotions. And when I first learned what I'm going to show you, it was taught to me, it was called the FivePart Model. So if that's something that you're familiar with, this might sound familiar. I have sort of kind of taken it and I do it a little bit different. So I don't like calling it that anymore because I don't do it with fidelity. I refer to it more of a cycle. And I like to tell people that we experience the emotions in 4 ways. We experience them in our body, in our mind, in our behaviors, and in our words. And each part of the cycle exacerbates the other. And I'm going to show you what that looks like because I'm a visual person. But when we focus on addressing just one part of the cycle, the others will fall into line. And that's what I mean when I say this is something that you can use in the moment, because addressing just one part of the cycle helps everything else kind of calm down, because we have control over those parts. We don't necessarily have control over the environmental trigger. So if you don't mind giving us a second, this might be a good time to go to the chat box while we get ourselves set up. I'm going to go to the whiteboard. We're going to turn off the PowerPoint and I'm going to show you my old school teacher skills.
All right, this should be interesting, you guys. And if you get motion sickness, I'm sorry.
I don't know the age of the humans on this call, but whenever I move my Zoom, I always feel like it's a little bit like the Blair Witch Project.
I like it.
Jordan, can you turn your camera on and just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Cool, okay. So this is my whiteboard. So I like to tell people you experience emotions in 4 ways. And because I'm a visual person, I always draw it like this. Is that seeable?
It's not super, there we go. I think that's better.
That is better. So I'm going to make that a little bit thicker.
Cool.
You experience emotions in 4 ways. You experience it in your body. You experience it in your mind. You experience it in your behaviors. And you experience it in your words. So what I mean by that one is that we call it something. And the example that I always give when I'm teaching it is about anxiety, because that's often the easiest. So I'm a person that experiences anxiety. I bet some of you are raising your hand on your screen too, because I think anxiety is a pretty normal thing for us in our present day. So I always go, okay, let's talk about anxiety. That's our word. That's what we're calling it, anxiety. How does anxiety feel in your body? And the person in front of me is like, oh, I think that it feels like my heart races. Or maybe I get really sweaty. Or maybe my palms sweat. Or maybe like I start to shake, right? And we come up together, we come up with some ways that your body experiences anxiety. And I go, okay, let's go to your thoughts, okay? How do you experience anxiety in your mind? What are your thoughts? And the example that I always use, I get really anxious when I'm driving in the rain. If you're not from Arizona, you maybe don't know this, but it doesn't rain here very often. Like ever, maybe like, I don't know, maybe 5 times a year, which is not very much. And I don't love it. I have some vision issues. You can see I'm wearing glasses. Like, we're not built for rain. The lines on the street are really hard to see. Nobody else around here knows how to drive in the rain. It's not my jam. I don't like driving in the rain. So if I smell rain outside, because it has a particular smell in Arizona, if I smell rain outside, I start to get anxious. And so when I'm talking about this example, I go, oh, these are the things that happen in my body. what happens in my mind about driving in the rain is I'm going to get in a car crash, or somebody's going to crash into me, or I'm going to go the wrong way, which happens in Arizona a lot more than you realize, people with that wrong way driving. Really what I'm thinking, if I'm going to be totally honest here, is I'm thinking that I'm going to hit like the median, my car's going to flip a bunch of times, it's going to blow up, I'm going to die in a fiery crash, and my mom's going to hear about it on the news, right? These are my thoughts. And if you notice, it's all some version of, I'm not safe. I'm not safe in this space. I don't know how to manage myself. I don't know what to do. I'm scared that something's going to happen, right? So I have my word. We're talking about anxiety. This is how I experience it in my body. My thoughts are some version of I'm not safe. And then I go, okay, so what about behaviors? How do you experience anxiety in your behaviors? Well, maybe I fidget. Or if we go back to the driving example, I grip the steering wheel really hard. I don't know about you guys, when I get anxious, my eyes dart back and forth. Right? Other things that might happen when we're talking to people that are really struggling, sometimes they say, when I get super anxious, one of my behaviors is that's when I self-harm. Okay. And I go, okay, so now we know what we're calling it is anxiety. This is how it happens in your body. This is what your thoughts do. This is what your behavior is because you're anxious, right? And the thing that's really important to remember is that all of these things, remember I said they exacerbate each other. They're all connected. Yes?
Awesome. Perfect.
And let me know, we do have a couple questions. I'm not sure when is a good time.
In just a minute, and I'm seeing them on the side. I think she'll get through this little piece, and then we'll jump onto those when my arms aren't about to fall off.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so we talk about how these things all exacerbate each other, right? And I always like to say, what's the thing that you notice is not in this? And they go, what are you talking about? And I go, notice the rain. Driving in the rain is not a part of this cycle because this activating event, I don't have control over. I don't make it rain as much as I wish I had that much power. It's raining, I have to get home, right? These are the things that I have control over. And because they affect each other, if I let them be out of control, then they just cycle. I get anxious, my body goes crazy, right? I sweat, my heart races, I can't breathe. And then my thoughts get worse and my behaviors get worse. And then I'm more anxious and it spins and spins and spins and spins and spins.
Panic attack.
That's how I experience a panic attack, right? But if you remember from that previous slide, you don't have to change all of these things. We're talking brief interventions. We're talking this is quick and dirty to let you tolerate the distress of driving in the rain so that you can get home and watch Grey's Anatomy, because that's what I do. So what we talk about is how can you intervene in just one of these? What can you do for your body, right? Well, I can turn the air conditioning on really high because I'm sweaty, right? And then I get less sweaty, so my mind gets a little bit clearer. I can loosen my grip on the steering wheel. Not that I'm not anxious, not that the rain hasn't gone away, but it's less. And then I can maybe take some breaths so that I can tell myself that I'm okay, so that I don't go the wrong way on the freeway. And then maybe instead of being anxious, maybe I'm just nervous, or maybe I'm just overwhelmed. And we talk through how you can slow this down, because it's not about getting rid of the rain. Sometimes it's not even about avoiding the rain because you got to get home, right? How can I tolerate this so that I can go do some EMDR with my therapist about why I don't like driving in the rain, right? This is just about taking care of myself so that I can tolerate the crisis.
Perfect.
Cool.
And I think it's important too to note that you can make a change in any of those areas, which I think Jessica already said. One of the things I say to clients a lot is find what is accessible to you in the moment, because I know for me personally, the thoughts are really hard. Like to even, you know, when I'm in that state, and I think when most people are in that state, it's hard to sometimes identify that, but I can notice that my breathing is shallow, right? I can notice that I'm feeling hot, you know, so what can I do with that? I turn on the air conditioner really high. You know, I start to do some box breathing, which maybe Jessica will tell us about later, we'll see. But I think that that's helpful. I know that that's been helpful for a lot of the first responders that I work with, of really introducing this and being able to help them get out of PTSD reactions, you know, in the midst of a crisis. So we're going to go ahead and sit down. So get ready for the motion sickness. Sorry, guys. Okay. Oh, my arms are shaking. That was a workout. Woo!
If only I could get the Zoom whiteboard.
No, it's okay. Actually, did that work out pretty well? I'm looking at Jordan. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Do you want to do questions?
Yeah, let's take a look at some of the questions that we have. Thanks, Jordan. That Grey's Anatomy joke hit home for me. I'm glad. I like chat box, it's fun. I saw one here. Let's see, would avoiding be a behavior? Absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's something, and I won't go off on a tangent, but that question actually brought up a client that I have, a young adult who, you know, there's a little bit of failure to thrive stuff going on. And one of the reasons why is because of a car accident that she had. And so when she gets into that anxious place, her behavior is to avoid driving, you know, and so she will sometimes get into the car, turn on the car, start to feel some of those sensations, and then she exits the building. So definitely, do you have anything else to add about that?
No, I think that's perfectly true. I think that fits.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so we're just looking at some comments. One second. We have another comment about loving to share this with educators. I think that's a huge piece too. Side plug, we're always happy to talk to school personnel. That's one of our favorite things to do since they have so much time with the kids. We love that.
Well, and I also like if we're talking school counselor style, a lot of times that's when they're actually in it. You know what I mean? Somebody comes into my office and they say, oh, I had a panic attack at school. We can absolutely talk about this for sure. And we go, okay, well, this is what you're going to try next time. But when I was a school counselor, it was more like, hey, I'm having a panic attack right now. And so being able to use this in the moment, I think was really, I was glad that I already knew it when I was a school counselor because it was super helpful.
One question that came up, and I think you guys touched on it a little bit, is just what about the spiritual aspects of that cycle as well?
You know, for me, it depends on the client that I'm talking to for sure. For me, that comes up in the mind part of it, the thoughts. Because depending on what we're talking about, I think that's when like a mantra can come in or prayer can come in, that kind of thing. Also, if we're talking about distress tolerance in the DBT perspective, if that's what you're teaching, a lot of the behaviors, and if you're familiar with DBT, the third part of distress tolerance is about improve the moment. And one of those things is prayer or meditation. And so for me, that comes in it's one of the things that we talk about as an intervention, like how can you change your thoughts if that's something that's accessible to you? And then how can that be a behavior if that's something that's accessible to you? So I'm obviously not, I promise you, I'm not going to meditate while I'm driving in the rain. But if we were talking about something else, a meditation or a prayer or something like that could certainly fit into that mind and behavior part. And that, I mean, I think that's something that's interesting to note too. I say like all of this impacts each other and all exacerbates each other, but they're also all really connected. A lot of times the things that you're doing to impact your body are also behaviors or also thoughts. A lot of times the thoughts are what's going to change what the word is, kind of a thing. So I don't know, I think that they can all be connected.
And I think we answered all of the questions. There was one question about, are we going to get, oh, there's another one. Hold on one second. Are we going to get slides? And yes, that's correct, Jordan, right? That they'll get the presentation.
Yep. Just to clarify for everyone, we will have a recording of this presentation as well as the slides, like a PDF download on the website within 7 days. And then I did see we had one other question. It just said, do you guys do any opportunities for like talking to parent groups about techniques to help their kids and things like that?
Absolutely. And typically what we've done in the past is we've done that through the school district. So Deer Valley is, you know, closest to our first office that we opened, you know, that district. So we have probably the closest relationship with them, but we also have relationships with Scottsdale and Glendale Union, and then Chandler, now that we're all over the valley. But we're happy to do that. I think that's a lot of where we get it. We're kind of passionate about that. So just a little bit.
Well, and because like I said, the school is where it's happening in real time. Not that adolescents don't have issues at home, because that's also part of it, but like when it's a normal year, they're in school all the time. And in this abnormal year, they were still in school. They just were on Zoom, only showing their forehead. So, right. I mean, the teachers and counselors are the ones that really see them more often than pretty much anybody else. So I think that that's important to share some of this with all of those humans.
Love it. Okay. So we will make sure that Jordan gets you guys our contact information, and it will also be on the last slide of this presentation as well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and share our screen again. Give us a sec here. I'm not super quick at this yet, but we will get there. Share. Okay. All right, so that is what we just talked about. And so now we're going to move into another little something that you guys are probably familiar with to some extent, cognitive behavioral therapy. And so this is sort of a piece of that, but it's something that I have found very useful personally in my life and with every client that I've worked with. And so we're kind of taking like that cycle that Jessica just went through and looking at the thought piece. This is really just focusing on that thought piece. And of course, depending on the thoughts, you know, that really determines behavior and choices around that and so forth. But I really want to spend a few minutes talking about thoughts. So I'm going to pull, usually I do this on the whiteboard, but I'm not going to do that in this instance. So I'm actually going to pull this whole slide up just so we can go through it. So one of the things that most people that we work with, adults and adolescents, don't realize is that feelings do not come out of thin air. You know, and I think that oftentimes we forget to teach sort of the basics, you know, because we've gone over that a lot, that, you know, our core belief system creates our thoughts create our feelings, all of that together sort of helps us determine and make a choice on how to behave. And then do-si-do, here we go again. And so I think it's very, 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 can I say very anymore? Yes, very valuable to take a step back and teach kids the basics. And I need these reminders too, you know? So I think that the adolescents that are coming in, you know, let's just use anxiety because we've been talking about that a lot. So an adolescent comes in, you know, wrought with anxiety, and, you know, they're doing things like skipping school. They're, you know, let's pretend it's not summer, but skipping school. They're, you know, shutting down and not talking to their parents, you know, just all of this kind of stuff is happening. And they come into your office and all they can say is like, I can't eat, right? They're talking about the body stuff. I can't eat. I'm not sleeping well. Like, I feel like I can't breathe. I feel like there's like a elephant on my chest all the time. Sometimes they don't even have the ability to really label what that is, right? Well, what is that? Because they're just feeling the physical. And so our job really is to help them understand what's going on within their bodies and give it a word, like Jessica was saying, you know, describe that and kind of come up with, okay, so this is some anxiety. Well, where is this anxiety coming from? I don't know. I wake up every morning and I just feel it, like before I even get out of bed, you know, I feel like I can't breathe. I don't know what this is about. And so it helps, I think, to dissect that and give some basic education that there is really no such thing, okay, in the world of mental health as just free floating anxiety. It comes from somewhere. And even though a lot of times we're not aware of the thought that is creating that anxiety, it's there. And so one of the things I like to teach people around that is there's a lot of power when we start to understand that our thoughts are really what is creating our distress, you know, because if it's my thought that I'm having creating the distress, then guess what? I have the power to change it. And so I think this is like one of the biggest pieces, you know, that we can give people and specifically adolescents. So if you look at the example that I pulled up, and of course I already shared with you, I'm a mom. So a lot of my examples come from there or clinical, a mom of teenagers and an almost 21-year-old daughter. I know you feel really bad for me right now. No, I'm just kidding. She's fabulous most of the time. So if you take a look, the piece there, my daughter snapped at me when I asked her about her day. Oh, just kidding. Oh, there we go. When I do these slides, and I think that it makes Jessica crazy because I go a little crazy with the PowerPoint. So I don't even know what's up there sometimes. But this piece that I just put up there that says my thoughts are based on my core belief system, that's kind of what I was just talking about too. So our thoughts, that those automatic thoughts that come up are based on what we believe about ourselves and the world around us. If we are somebody that has had, a lot of like nurturing and positive experiences in life, our parents and caregivers were there to catch us when we fell. We believe that, the world is basically a good place and humans are good people, right? My thoughts and my core belief system and the thoughts it produces might be very different than from somebody who comes from an upbringing with a lot of trauma where I didn't have that safety net and I wasn't safe. Same goes for experiences I've had with other humans. So if I'm an adolescent who has experienced bullying, okay, like in 7th and 8th grade, big time, and I go into high school, my automatic thought around social situations is oftentimes going to be things like, they're all looking at me, they're laughing at me, they don't like me, they're talking about me, right? Whereas if I, had a situation when I was growing up and where things were good and I had a positive, using the good or bad term, sorry about that, but I had a positive sort of upbringing and peer relationships were healthy and supportive, my tape that I play myself, those thoughts are going to look a little bit different. So just going through an example of a way to teach this, and this example is a little bit more geared towards parents, because I think since we're adults in the room, if we get it on a personal level, then we can teach it to other people. So my daughter snapped at me when I asked her about her day. That is not a thought, that's data. Now, we could argue that the word snapped, we could say, well, what does that actually mean? Because I think there's a little bit of, our own judgment in that, but that's really looking at the data, a fact. My daughter snapped at me when I asked about her about her day. What I might make up, because, we're dealing with kids on an everyday basis and we love our kids and we take things personally sometimes and like their happiness means a lot. And maybe I have a core belief that if my daughter's not happy, then I'm not a worthy parent, right? Kind of going to that. So I might go to this place of my daughter is disrespecting me. That's my thought. That thought creates anger, fear, sadness, maybe some shame, guilt. So what do I do with that? If I have the experience of my daughter snapping at me, I say to myself, my daughter is disrespecting me and I'm angry, I might snap back and tell her, you're being disrespectful. And the consequence of that, even though that might be true, that might be a very true statement, is that my daughter shuts down and goes to her room, right? And we have this loss of connection in this interaction that maybe didn't need to happen. So daughter feels alone, I feel alone, neither of us are connected and we're not happy about the interaction that we had. So another example that we could choose to do instead, if we buy into the belief that my thoughts are something that I can take a look at and control, and that there are other perspectives that might need to be examined. My daughter snaps at me when I ask her about her day, still the same data, but instead, maybe, and this is where a lot of times I'll do a breakdown of a situation. Maybe the adolescent had an argument and we're kind of flipping the situation or the scenario. And so I'll kind of go on the board and start asking them, okay, what is your thought? Okay, your thought is that, your mom just doesn't respect you. Okay, what are some other thoughts? What are some other things? What are some other possibilities? You don't have to believe in them, but what are some other possibilities that could have been happening that could be a different alternative thought that you might be able to come up with? Well, she had a hard day at work, or, she's just like concerned about me, or, those kind of things. And so with this example, we could go to a place of something's bothering my daughter. Maybe I should get more information. Maybe this isn't about me. Right. And so we teach people, instead of going to, the thought that is going to bring up that like conflict, that conflict before we know actually what's going on, is get really curious. I talk about Curious George a lot. when we go to this, get to this place of being curious. Isn't it interesting that my daughter snapped at me when I asked her about her day? That's an interesting response. Like, I really wonder what that's about, right? And so if I'm going to that place of curiosity, you know, I'm not feeling, and it's not sunshine and rainbows, right? Like granted, this happens and my automatic response is not going to be these things. I have to pause, right? And I pause usually right about here, okay? And I'm not feeling curiosity or concern. I'm feeling anger, okay? Because I'm like, hey, I pay for this house. I do all of these things for you. And like, I don't deserve to be talked to that way, which is absolutely a true thing. But in terms of being relational and in terms of managing the emotions and connection, that's not helpful. So I get to that anger and I pause. And then I ask myself, and I swear I practice this, Jessica knows, but I'll ask myself, okay, what are some other things that would, like, pause for a second, what could be going on with her? Let's generate some alternatives.
A lot of times what you say out loud is, what else could be true?
Yeah, I do. I say that a lot, don't I? And I think that's helpful because we don't have to abandon the thought that we might have some attachment to. We don't have to abandon it. We're just putting it to the side for a minute to really come up with other hypotheses. There we go. So if I'm approaching this situation with curiosity and concern, I might give my daughter some space and then and also myself some space to breathe and revisit by responding and asking questions. And the consequence for that behavior is that I end up having a closer relationship and I'm able to respond rather than react. You know, I'm not going to say to my daughter, you're being an ungrateful brat, right? Like that's not going to happen. You know, and that I can give consequences also, you know, with that, but in a relational way. And so I think this is really helpful to teach anybody, you know, but we're talking about adolescents today because they don't get it. Like, have you had that experience too, Jess? They're like in the beginning, they're like, wait, what? Like life happens to me.
No, my thought just comes. I don't have control over it. What I think is super cool about this too, and this is not about acuity in the moment, like I've been spouting all day, but what's cool about this is once they do get it, this helps give them some insight into where they need to draw boundaries. And so that's because we're talking about a parent, right? So the parent can say, you know, I'm going to give you some space and we're going to have a conversation about it later, et cetera, et cetera. And because you have a closer relationship, you have the ability to say, listen, I know that you had a hard day and it's not acceptable for you to speak to me that way. So we need to work through how to interact differently. So just throwing that out there.
Love it. Okay. So actually I'm going to, Jordan, can you tell me, because I'm sharing the screen, I can't see, do we have questions?
It looks like, this is Debbie, it looks like we had one question. She says, you ask teenagers what is wrong. I don't know why. Sorry, it moved. How do we help them? I tried talking to my grandchild, but it works for a day or two. He thinks he's lazy and he's not worth anything. What do you do about that?
Can you repeat that last part? So he thinks, I tried to talk to, it works for a day or two.
Yeah, but he thinks he's lazy and that he is not worth anything.
Okay. Yeah. And that comes down to, and thank you for that question. And I think, because I think, you know, we're all helping professionals, but this is also very personal, you know, and this is being human. And so, you know, what comes up for me when I hear that is that's really about a core belief system. And so if my core belief is that I'm unworthy, then even if I have conversations with people or maybe go to therapy once a week or, you know, different things like that to kind of help change that, I can do work on changing my thoughts and my behaviors all day long. But if I'm not working on that core belief system, if I get into any other situation that's not the exact one we're working on, that core belief is going to be triggered and I'm still going to go to that place of I'm worth less. Okay. And so I think that's where we're going to talk about some different options that Transitions offers, but also, you know, there's lots of other places across the Valley that do really good work with this. I think, you know, individual counseling is a really good place to start for an adolescent who is, you know, where it's like, I talked to my kiddo or I talked to my grandchild and things get better for a minute. And then 2 days later, they're feeling the same way. I think individual counseling is a good place to start to work on that core belief system with the therapist. That being said, we've seen a tremendous amount of success with group work with adolescents. There's so much value in the peer group. And here's the thing, if I'm telling my kid, like I will never stop telling my kids how wonderful they are. I also tell them the things they need to work on, let's be clear. But there's a balance. I'm still learning. But I will never stop telling them how wonderful they are. Also, my opinion of them doesn't mean much at this point in their lives, because if we look at the stages of development, when kids get to, and Jessica might know this better than me, what is the age where peer group starts being?
I mean, it's usually right about middle school. So,
Yeah.
you know, 11, 12, 13, where they start, like, their job in adolescence is to separate from their family and connect with their peers. Like, that's developmentally, that's what is supposed to happen. So they're not supposed, I mean, they're supposed to care what you think. Sorry. I don't have children. They're not,
you just have 1,000 of them.
I do have 1,000 kids. They're not supposed to care what you think, because their job is to separate from their family of origin and create their identity in that individuation process with their tribe, which is why we find group therapy to be so effective. Like Megan said, with it's effective with adults too, but with adolescents, because there's like a commonality there, and they connect and all of those things. And developmentally, that's who they're supposed to be connecting with. And when they do it in a group therapy environment, they're doing it effectively. They're building relationships the way that relationships are supposed to be built, with boundaries and communication and all of those things.
Which changes their self-concept, you know, and that core belief system. So I hope that answers the question. You know, don't stop telling him how wonderful he is, and, you know, being his cheerleader. And also, he just might need some additional support to work on that.
Wonderful. Let's see. A comment is, love the example. I'm a counselor and have 2 teens who challenge what I teach in my profession. There should be a group or something for parents who work in the field.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Let's see. Another comment. Another one. I think individualized and specific feedback with teens is really important, highlighting what about them is unique and awesome.
Yes,
I agree.
Absolutely.
And then let's see, the Franklin reality model can be used to address core beliefs, which then impacts thoughts, behaviors, and hope basic needs are being addressed.
Awesome. Cool.
Let's see, another one says, great example. This takes me back to when I was a teen. I didn't feel my parent had any capacity based on our history to hold the gravitas of emotion. In other words, my parent was not trustworthy with my vulnerability, so it didn't matter what they paid for my roof. They had neglected my heart. Oh,
thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable. That is such a perfect example, you know, of what we're talking about. Also with the core beliefs, you know, because of what that leads to in terms of feeling safe or unsafe, you know, in the world or in relationships. So thank you for sharing that.
awesome. And that was the last comment for now. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, wow, time is going by really fast. So I want to talk a little bit about levels of care. And I know that we have a very diverse audience. So for some of you, this might be like, oh, I know this, and you can just kind of take a little nap. No, I'm just kidding. Please don't. But for some of you, this might be a little bit new. So I'm going to go through this a little quickly. If you have questions, please, you know, put those in the little question box, and Debbie, feel free to interrupt me. I want to get to the other piece of the presentation and make sure we spend ample time on it. So basically, when we're looking at levels of care, there it is. Okay. Basically, when we're looking at levels of care, and I didn't talk about a couple of pieces like residential treatment, but I sort of wanted to go through how we titrate up and down, which I will in a slide in just a little bit. But general outpatient counseling, typically clients will come in for 1 time per week or biweekly for 60 minutes. General group counseling is usually about 90 minutes. Sometimes they have 2-hour groups 1 time per week. And then it goes into intensive outpatient, which is typically 3 times per week for 2.5 to 3 hours per session. And different outpatients, depending on what they're treating, might look different ways in terms of the setup of days of the week and hours as well. But that is the traditional format. Partial hospitalization, typically 5 days per week, 3 to 6 hours per day, depending on the program. And then sort of that final step is inpatient stabilization. And the reason why I want to talk about this today, or we want to talk about this today, it's actually several pieces. One is, I know at Transitions, this is something, I think Jessica said this earlier, this is something that we talk about as a staff on a daily basis, you know, with clients. We are very, very invested in making sure that clients are receiving care in the least restrictive environment possible that meets their needs. We are also incredibly invested in making sure that whatever level of care that they're in, we are working very hard to establish support outside of the therapeutic environment, because our goal is really for them to get what they need and go back to living, right? And so I think that's something that's important for us to have in mind when we're thinking about levels of care. Anything else on that? Okay. So what I did, like I'm going to kind of go through just some slides, and I also came up with a case example. I don't know about you guys, but I learn better that way. So we're going to go with that. And I don't have the case example on slides. I have some, basically I'm going to kind of give you just an example. So outpatient counseling, and just basic individual outpatient counseling, to fit into this category or be appropriate, the client needs to be stable and have some evidence of short-term consistent stability. So, you know, they're able to do kind of the ADLs, you know, without like a lot of support. You know, if they're given a homework assignment, you know, they're going to most likely 80% of the time, you know, do that.
Depends on how old they are.
It does depend on how old they are. I know. I know. I have much better luck with the adolescents. The clients demonstrate the ability to practice coping skills in several environments. Doesn't need to be 100%, but you know, they're working. Even when safety issues are a concern, client is able to contract for safety, use a safety plan and is in a safe environment. And the function of individual outpatient counseling is to process experiences, teach and reinforce skills, and support clients in the work they do outside of session. So my case example is a lovely lady named Emma, who's 15 years old and attending Mountain Point High School, whose mascot is
The Pride.
Little fun fact, she knows every mascot.
Not every.
Well, I would say 90%
of
the mascots of any high school in Arizona. So fun fact. I don't know how her memory works, but it's kind of wonderful. So Emma has been seeing her guidance counselor at school because she noticed a significant drop in grades and attendance. And during the meeting with the counselor, Emma admitted to feeling sad much of the time, and also that her parents had recently separated. The guidance counselor calls the parents, who come in for a meeting, and a recommendation is made for Emma to see a therapist. Emma is assessed by the counselor. There's no current danger to self or others. There's not really a report of past or current self-harm, no report of the use of mood-altering chemicals. So this would be a client who is very much, at least seemingly on the surface, appropriate for outpatient counseling. Group therapy, again, is very much, I'm not going to go through each of the points because it's the same as the slide before. We're really looking for a client who, and this is non-IOP, so 90 minutes, you know, once a week. But we're looking for a client that has some level of stability. And part of the reason why this is really important for with adolescents, we have them for 90 minutes once a week in this format, and that's not a lot. And so if they're having issues with peer group and they don't have like the stuff that Jessica was talking about, they don't have the ability to tolerate distress, they don't really have a lot of coping skills, and maybe they don't have a whole lot of support outside of therapy, it actually could be a triggering experience for them being with a peer group. So we have to make sure that the kiddo has the skills necessary even for the intervention. And I know that sounds funny, but there's a lot of different things that we need to look at, you know, before throwing them into group therapy or family counseling, right? So, yeah. And this Emma is going to teach us a little bit about that. So the function of outpatient group therapy is to process experiences in a supportive environment, teach and reinforce skills, and garner peer support, as well as clinical support in the work being done outside of the session. And we talked about why that's really important. So Emma begins individual therapy, and she starts to work through her grief related to her parents' separation, as well as other events that have occurred in her peer group over the last year. So she's doing all of this in individual therapy, and she discovers that she has a high level of social anxiety, which oftentimes makes her feel sick to her stomach, resulting in her missing school. This increases her fear about her grades and keeps her in this perpetual cycle of anxiety. Her counselor then, based on that information, refers her to the 90-minute, once-a-week mood management group. Emma continues to see her individual therapist and then adds that 1 week, once a week group where she's able to practice the skills she's learning in individual and group counseling with her peer group. And what we see with Emma is that her levels of social anxiety begin to decrease, and actually her attendance to school increases. So go Emma.
Go Emma.
Now, what oftentimes we'll see is like life happens, right? Life happens to all of us. But I think those of you who work with adolescents or have them in your lives, they are so attached to the daily things and daily emotions that are happening that you can go from, I know you've had this experience. I've worked with clients where I'm with an adolescent and things are going awesome for like a while. And then something
All of a sudden.
Yeah, all of a sudden, we're talking about hospitalization and it's like, where did the middle go? And that's because they don't have a lot of times the ability to tolerate the stress or the life experience, to know that this will pass, right? The wave will end. So Emma, is stable for about 4 weeks when her parents deliver the message that they are getting divorced and that Emma will be living with her mother, who she has high conflict with. Family counseling is attempted, which would usually be sort of the go-to, right? But Emma shuts down and refuses to participate. Emma's father walks into her bedroom and finds her self-harming with a razor. And Emma makes the comment, "I would rather be dead than live with her." So Emma's father contacts a therapist and gets her in for an emergency session. Emma contracts for safety, stating, "For now, I guess." Therapist recommends IOP to increase structure and frequency of interventions and support and to help prepare Emma for adjustment. So IOP is, I'm going to say this sounds really funny, but it's my favorite level of care. I know that sounds really funny, but I think what we get to do with that, which is so wonderful, is we get to, most of our IOPs happen on like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday format. We actually have one that's, is it Tuesday? Yeah.
It's Wednesday, Friday, Saturday.
Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, which I really like. Not everybody's down to bring their kids in on Saturdays, but I love that because it gives kids this safety net and this opportunity to practice the skills that they're learning at home. And they're not like, a lot of them will do like their individual session over the weekend or whatnot. So they usually don't go more than about 24 hours without being able to be in a supportive environment and have feedback, and so I think it really gives that extra, that extra piece that many need to get through. So in IOP, what we really need is for the client to be moderately stable. How would you define that, by the way?
I know, I was wondering that because I think that that's a hard, for me, they maybe are not always regulating their emotions, but they are willing to keep themselves safe.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to too, like how long can they go? I ask myself this, how long can this person go without support? Can they go that 24-hour period between sessions? And if the answer is yes, then that I would consider to be moderately stable.
Yeah.
So maybe experiencing SI or urges for SIB, but is actively working to manage them. Does not have many coping skills or has not been willing or able to practice them, but is willing to work in this area. And again, the function is much the same. It's just a higher level of care in terms of the number of hours.
Yeah, well, and I think I like to tell people that IOP leans more towards the skill building, where the weekly group leans more towards the skill maintenance. It's definitely like an individualized situation, and it's not, sometimes people are in IOP and they have learned lots of the skills, or sometimes they're in group and they've never been in IOP, so all of the skills are new. But it's about like building them up, whereas the weekly group therapy is a little bit more like maintenance.
Perfect. So lovely Emma begins IOP and starts to engage in treatment. She had not reported self-harm behaviors and was able to contract for safety. Emma was in the care of her father since beginning IOP, so she had that stable environment. But as a result of the parenting plan, Emma is moved to mother's home. Again, Emma deteriorates. She begins cutting herself regularly and making passive suicidal thoughts. Although when confronted, will contract for safety. She states, "I am not going to kill myself. I just think it would be easier if I were not here." So at this point, the recommendation for partial hospitalization, missed an M, sorry guys, but partial hospitalization is made because the client really at this point is not moderately stable. She's really having a hard time hanging in there, and 24 hours is too long, being in this new environment. Also at this point, she's still not able to, because she hasn't had enough time to build up those like to do the skill building, to participate in family therapy. It's more of a triggering event for her than something that is going to help her get to the next. She hasn't learned how to develop boundaries yet. So PHP, like I said, typically, you know, you're coming to a facility, outpatient or hospital. Of course, you're outpatient there too, but usually 5 days a week, anywhere from 3 to 6 hours each day. The focus is still in the same, it's just more intensive in terms of the time spent in interaction with the therapist and the peers. So Emma begins PHP and starts to form pro-social relationships with the group. On Sunday evening, and she's doing better, on Sunday evening, Emma's father cancels visitation, and she and her mother have an altercation, which results in Emma pulling a knife from the kitchen and threatening to kill herself. Emma is not able to use her coping skills and is unwilling to contract for safety. Emma is then admitted for acute stabilization. So this is, we're using Emma because this is an example that has happened, you know, it happens frequently. It can be about bullying or a boyfriend or girlfriend or, you know, grades, like it's looking at kind of those triggers. And sometimes we have to step up before we can step down. So I think you guys kind of know, I'm not going to go through each point. Going back to Emma, so she's inpatient. Emma's working on her skills and she has had additional time for her medication regimen to stabilize. The case manager at the hospital is coordinating, and I made it about our facility, so just go with us. The case manager at the hospital is coordinating care with Transitions Patient Care and Treatment Coordinator, Lauren Gren. It's a new position, then we love her in, who is also monitoring Emma's progress and preparing for her return. Lauren communicates with the hospital team, family, and transitions team for her return. And within 24 hours of Emma's discharge, she has been seen by a therapist and she's starting back to PHP. Why do we have her starting back in PHP? All too often, this is what happens. We see clients go inpatient and then, like, I don't know what happens, but all of a sudden they're cured. And the reason that they went into inpatient doesn't exist anymore. And so what happens is the hospital becomes a revolving door, right? So we very, very strongly suggest to parents, you know, and again, it's very individualized. It's depending on appropriateness, but, you know, we wouldn't just take somebody off, like, I'm not a psychiatrist, but usually a psychiatrist doesn't just take someone off medication, you know, unless there's like a major issue with it. Like we titrate down with support. And so that's really what we encourage, you know, to happen with our clients too. So with this, you know, she starts PHP. Emma is in PHP for 2 weeks and continues to show stability. Emma is stepped down to IOP level of care and monitoring is continued. And then at this point, once we've established that she is stable and she is able to use her coping skills and has learned how to have boundaries with her mom and have some communication about her needs and wants in limit setting, she starts to participate in family therapy. The team keeps IOP in her treatment plan so that she can be wrapped in support during the time she's doing the initial family therapy sessions with mom. Family therapy is successful and Emma is stepped down to 2 times per week individual therapy with 1 time per week aftercare group. Okay. There's Emma. Not really, but we'll call her Emma. Clip art Emma. And this is just a slide showing, I'm not going to go through this because I just did, but showing basically what we talked about with Emma, that titrating up, right? Least restrictive environment possible for an appropriate level of care. And then titrating down and what that looks like. One of the, I think, really wonderful and unique things about our facility is that we offer all levels of care except for inpatient, you know, which is where Aurora comes in. And I guess I didn't really say this, and I don't think we said it in the intro, but I worked for Aurora for like 3 years in the beginning/middle of my career. And so we have a really good relationship, you know, with them and other hospitals in the Valley, just around being able to offer those different levels of care. And so there are often times when a client might step down from IOP and then they're doing really well. And then they have, I guess what we call is like a flare up. That's what I say.
I think that's fit.
So something happens and they need just like additional support. We may, if it's appropriate, bring them back into IOP for like 1 or 2 weeks while they're dealing with the trigger. And then we titrate them right back down into the other level of care. So we're able to do that, which is really, really helpful. Okay.
And we do have a couple of comments. Is this a good spot?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. One question, are you doing group telemental health sessions?
So we do both. We do both, and it's been, I won't go into the whole thing because it's been interesting with COVID. We kind of, I want to say we have it down to a science, which I think is pretty true, as much as we can.
Science as we can get.
Yeah. So we do utilize most of our services. The majority are in person at this point. That being said, Zoom is always an option, and we do have one adolescent IOP that is Zoom based. One thing I'll say about that though is it very much depends on appropriateness for the particular kiddo. If we have an adolescent that has any indication or history of self-harm or SI, we will not put them in Zoom. It's not, we can't keep them safe that way. And so if we have a client that's maybe struggling with anxiety, things like that, and the parents, either there's, transportation issues, or the parents don't feel comfortable, with the COVID stuff of being in person, that's when we utilize that option. And then we don't have any other groups going right now that are Zoom, do we?
Not for adolescents.
No, but our parent groups, which are a requirement for our clients participating in IOP and PHP, our parent groups are all on Zoom because we find that removes the barrier.
Interesting.
Yes.
Let's see, that's great. Let's see, in Arizona, is there a tool often used to determine level of care like the CANS?
Not that I'm aware of. Typically what we go by, we showed you kind of on the slides, but there is a tool in terms of insurance companies, like what insurance will pay for and when a person will be admitted. And that's pretty helpful because they will pull it apart based on like behavioral markers, kind of what we did. And that's what we utilize in our assessment.
We also use the safety protocol to determine like the risk for suicidality. And a lot of times that provides information about what the appropriate level of care might be.
Awesome. Let's see, and the last comment is, Regina shared positiveintelligence.com, said this is an awesome 6-week free program for parents who work in the field that will help the adults learn about ourselves and how our brain gets hijacked and wonderful things we can do to grow beyond our current limitations with relationships, family, and business.
I love it. Thank you, Regina.
And then Megan said, good question. The CANS is from Kentucky and the LOCUS for adults. Love those assessments.
Cool.
That was all the comments. Thank you.
I love it. Okay. So we're going to move into the final part of our presentation.
Well, and we, amidst all of this, right, all of these things that we're talking about, the last 18 months, all of the things, people going in and out of levels of care, titrating up, titrating down, high acuity, I don't know what to do, they're not in school, they're in school, like all of these things, you're the ones that are providing care and support, right? Like you, and I said this about schools as well, because they're the ones that are seeing them in real time. And if you are in outpatient, if you're in an inpatient facility, if you're in like outpatient groups, like you're the one that is sitting there holding all of this for them. I had said earlier that one of our charges as clinicians is to hold space. Well, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but you're also humans. I know sometimes we feel like we're superheroes, or at least we're trying to be, but you need to take care of yourself as well. If you are on an airplane and it loses altitude, they tell you that you're supposed to put the mask on yourself first, right? And I know that sometimes that's like a hokey adage, but it's true. And what's interesting, the thing that I always like to think about with this is I'm gonna be real, if I was on an airplane and the masks fell down and there's a child sitting next to me, I'm probably going to put the mask on them first. But what if I pass out? What if I die? What if all of those things, right? So you're supposed to put it on yourself first. This is my argument. If I was in that situation, this is not how we actually fly on planes. But what if when I got on the plane, I put the mask on myself as soon as I sat down? And I wore the mask the whole time. I took care of myself the whole time. And then there was a change in cabin pressure. I'm already ready to put the mask on the child. I'm already ready to put the mask on the elderly person because I've been working on taking care of myself the whole time.
Because I think what happens is, especially people in the helping profession, but I think what happens is that we see these things happening and it's not logically like we think, oh, I don't need to take care of myself. It's simply that the person in front of us feels more urgent. It feels like it's more, I'm going to put this in quotes, important to take care of them before we take care of ourselves, because we know we can do that later. It's just that we don't always get to later.
So we need to make that less of a reaction and more of a consistent, non-negotiable piece of our lives.
Yes. So you might recognize this because it looks just like the cycle that we talked about of tolerating distress, because self-care comes in our body. It comes in our thoughts, the way that we talk to ourselves in our own mind. It comes in our behaviors, and it comes in our words as well. And although we don't necessarily look at this the exact same way, because I don't necessarily say, oh, well, if you take care of your body by eating well, then your thoughts will be fine and your behaviors will be fine and your words will be fine. But I do think that these things all affect each other, and it's a lot easier to address all four of them if you're working on at least one, right? Tangible ideas for self-care when it comes to the body, things that stimulate your senses, exercise, breath work, hydration, food choices, all of those things. I think it can be something as simple as I pay an extra $2 for the shampoo that I really like the smell of it, because that way, no matter what, I'm starting my day by stimulating my senses in a positive way, right? Exercise is not my favorite thing to do, but I do try to make sure I go out and walk every morning because it gets my blood flowing, gets me the sun, gets vitamin D. I do breath work literally every day. When I wake up, the first thing I do is take 5 breaths every single day. If you take the time to concentrate on your body, especially in the morning, in my opinion, it will set you up, right? Things that stimulate your mind, it's different for everybody. Some people, it's books, podcasts, crossword puzzles, Sudoku. It's not my jam because I'm not into numbers.
Nope.
But
that's why we're therapists.
That's why I'm a therapist. But taking the time to do things that stimulate your mind. I am like, maybe it's just this season of my life, but I'm a huge podcast fan. I listen to them all the time. I like the true crime ones. I like Tiffany Rowe. She's a therapist. I like listening to Brene Brown. She has a podcast, like all of these things that stimulate my mind. And you can do them while you're walking, while you're driving, while you're doing the dishes, while you're writing notes in between clients. Behaviors, routines, boundaries. I actually, when I first made this slide, put that all in caps and bolded, but I took it away because it felt aggressive. Setting boundaries, and I mean setting boundaries in your relationship, setting boundaries with yourself, setting boundaries with your time, with your clients. If you say this is a 50-minute session because I need 10 minutes to write a note and go to the bathroom, end it at 50 minutes. And don't get me wrong, I know the world that we live in. I know that there are situations where somebody says, well, I'm feeling suicidal today at minute 50. You don't just boot them out the door. But generally, 50 minutes, 10 minutes for a note. Also, I need 20 minutes to decompress when I get home. Now, like I said, I don't have children, so sometimes that's easier than others. But my husband's not allowed to talk to me for the first 20 minutes that I'm home. That is the agreed upon time. I'm not allowed more than 20 minutes, but like setting boundaries on your time, limiting technology, spending time with the people that you love, take an email detox. Don't tell my boss that I said that. It's okay not to check your email on Sunday.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then words, affirmations out loud, affirmations written, gratitude practice, I think is huge. So here's the funny thing about this slide. I don't believe that I wrote anything on here that you don't already know, because I know that these are the kinds of things that you tell your clients. And I think that where we get into trouble is the how. And so I like to break it up into a couple of steps. Number one, you have to make a plan. You have to identify routines that will allow you the time to engage in these activities. I know that everybody's life is different. Some people have children, some people don't have children, some people have dogs, some people have fish, some people work 10 hours a week, some people work 60. I understand that everybody's life is different, but what will work for you? Identify routines that will allow you to have time. For me, first thing in the morning works swimmingly. If I had a 6-month-old, that would probably not be the case. I would have to do something different. So you have to look at your life and decide what's going to fit for you. Determine when you can do those routines. Do you need to do them before work, after work, at lunch, 10 a.m.? What fits in your life? And write it down. I know that that seems a little bit, I don't know that that seems silly. I think sometimes that can seem silly, but what I think is super helpful is for you to take a notebook and do a brain dump of what are the things that you want to do. If you had all of the time in the world, how would you practice self-care? And then when could you do it? Because my guess is if you got to those 2 categories, you would be able to figure something out. What were you gonna say?
I was just going to say a lot of this does seem silly, but we don't do it.
I know.
And so my wonderful business partner / best friend here, one of the things that I've stolen from her that I didn't even share this with you yet, I've actually shared with 2 clients, and it's the simplest strategy ever, but they're actually like using it, and so am I, and it's wonderful. We have those little like notebooks, right? The little, what do you even call those? Like
It's like a spiral notebook.
Spiral notebook, not full size, because that would drive me nuts, and because it's got to have a lot of pages, right? But I write every page is a different day of the week. And on Sundays, because that works in my schedule, I sit down and I plan out my week. But here's the thing, I don't only put things that I need to do, like, pay that bill or do this presentation for Aurora or, whatever. Like literally on my piece of paper that I'm looking at right now is this presentation. But you know what was earlier? My run. You know what's later is me taking, actually after this presentation, going and getting a Starbucks and sitting just outside and by the pool for 15 minutes. There's a checkbox next to each of those things. And then I get the like wonderful relief of like crossing everything off, as I go through the day. But I think that it's so simple, but it holds you to it, because if you're on this call, the chances are that you may be, I don't know, a bit of a perfectionist, and that it's important for you to get the things done on your to-do list, right? You have stress if you don't get the things done on your to-do list. Just making that up, maybe that's not you. But if you put it on your to-do list and it's something about self-care, chances are you're going to do it, but don't move it to the next day.
That was aggressive.
That was aggressive.
In a beautiful way. So no, I think writing it down is huge. I think that it helps hold us accountable. We're only holding ourselves accountable to ourselves, but I think that that's important. Step 2, set the stage. Identify the boundaries. Did you hear that? Bold caps. I don't want to be aggressive. Identify the appropriate boundaries that you need to have time to engage in those activities. If you want to meditate before you get home from work every day and you need to ask somebody to leave you alone, you have to ask them. Or if you want to sit in your car and meditate before you come inside, you need to tell your partner, if you hear me pull into the garage, don't come out. Or your kids, if you hear me pull into the garage, don't come out. I don't know if they'll listen to you, but identify the boundaries that are needed and tell the people what you are doing. Post your plan. You don't have to share all of your deep, dark secrets, all of the things that you're doing, but it's important for people that are supporting you to know. Make preparations if it's helpful. Fill up your water bottle or set out your workout clothes the night before, those kinds of things. Set the stage so that when you awaken to your day, all you have to do is step into your plan. The third one is the hardest. Are you ready?
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Do the things. It honestly is just as simple as that. I know that there's complicated ways to navigate it, but really you have to do it. That's it. That's all I have to say.
No excuses.
No excuses. And then finally, and this is the teacher in me, reflect and revise. Plan out a week. Just because something didn't quote unquote work doesn't mean it wasn't valuable. What did you learn from that? If you said, I'm going to meditate every single day, but you didn't meditate more than once, what can you learn from that? Can you learn that maybe that's not the thing that you need to do right now? Or can you learn that you need to change your boundaries so that you can do that? Reflect on how it went and revise your plan if needed. You are worth the effort, and trying again is worth the effort. Don't give up. Just do it a little bit differently, because you are holding a lot. We just had a whole conversation about how much we're all holding, and like nobody gets that better than the humans that are on this call. And you are the one that's responsible for taking care of yourself so that we can all take care of other people.
Beautifully said. The last piece is just, we'll just flash through it. You guys will have this, we already talked about all of this stuff, basically what we offer, but, and that'll be also, we'll probably have Jordan actually send out, if he's okay with it, but just some information about our facilities so that you all have our contact information and know what we do. But we do treat adolescents and adults. We treat general mental health and eating disorders. And we do have 5 locations across the valley, including our newest, which we will be having an open house in the next couple of months. Woo woo!
In person.
In person. Woo woo! Even better. But it is in the South Mountain area in Ahwatukee, basically off of Elliott and 51st Street. So I think that is all for our presentation. Let me get to the stop share if we have any final questions.
I did not see any really, does transitions, do you guys take access or is it private insurance coverage, private pay?
It's private insurance, yes. And then of course we do private pay too, but mainly insurance. And the only access plan, unfortunately, that we take is Care First. Other than that, we are not contracted with other insurance, other access plans.
We are contracted with TRICARE though.
We are contracted with TRICARE.
And then I think I just saw one about referrals. How does the referral process work for you guys?
So we have the person that I was talking about, Lauren Gren, who's absolutely fabulous. She is our go-between, in-between person. You can directly call any of us here. Lauren Gren would be a great resource. You can also go onto our website and there's a form to fill out in the provider section if you're wanting to make a referral. And yeah, that's any of those ways would be just fine. Any locations in the Northwest Valley? Yes, we are actually live from our facility on 40th Street and Bell. So that's sort of northeast, I guess. And then we also have 2 locations in Glendale around the Arrowhead Mall area.
Wonderful. And then lots of comments just about how helpful this was, especially those self-care tip strategies and things like that. Well, folks, we're running short on time. So if you have additional questions, please reach out. We'll make sure that we're sending out your contact information with our follow-up email with our CEUs. And I just want to say thank you again. You guys did a very fantastic job. There was a lot of amazing takeaways.
Did you laugh at all my jokes?
Did you laugh? Okay, good.
I laughed. That Grey's Anatomy one hit me. It was an at-home moment right there. I felt personally attacked when you said don't let your checklist move to the next day. That was wonderful too.
Well, yeah.
No, it was good. No, it was a personal attack in like a really good way. So it's something we have to remind ourselves of.
I like that.
You know, I wanted to take a few moments. Thank you, everyone who was here today and attended this as well. We do look forward to seeing you at the next ones. Actually, we have a date planned for our next one, June 22nd. If you'd like to mark your calendars, we'll have more details coming soon. I know I'm going to put this in there. You guys mentioned podcasts are a great thing that everyone should do. I have a favorite one, and I just want to share it with you all in case you'd like to add this one to your subscriptions. Aurora, Arizona, your host of this wonderful thing, has a podcast called Minding Our Mental Health. And you know what? It's not just on our website. It's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Music. Give us a search at Aurora, Arizona, and enjoy those beautiful episodes. In addition to that, thank you guys again. We have so many great takeaways. I loved hearing about Emma's story. It felt very personal to, I'm sure, a lot of folks that are around here. If you guys have any questions about their programs, I love that you guys offer an adolescent PHP program. I do want to let folks know there's no shortage of resources that are out there right now. We know as a hospital for us as well, we do offer IOP for teens and things like that. And again, with kind of the boom of things that are out there, we love to have providers that we can rely upon like you guys. So we just thank you for that ongoing partnership, and thank you everybody for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. We appreciate it. Thank you guys for attending. And I saw one, Transitions Counseling and Consulting is the name of our facility. There was a question. And yes, Chandler and Ahwatukee, 2 East Valley locations.
This was wonderful. Thank you, ladies, so much. I laughed too. I was
good.
I love trainings where I can laugh. So
that's like our goal.
That's next to my heart. I remember stuff better that way. So
good. We can't take life too seriously. It's already too serious. So
true. Yeah.
Sometimes all we can do is laugh.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all again, and and have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
Wednesday. All right. Bye.
Bye.